Welcome to Academy's chapter about NGRX. We are in the Angular course, and this is the NGRX chapter, where we will have several lessons discussing about the popular state management library, NGRX. So let's talk about the NGRX packages. What's the purpose of NGRX? It's important to understand what these packages are all about before we start learning about NGRX. So we'll explain what NGRX as well as show a demo of an Angular application with a state managed with NGRX. It's important that you see and understand what is NGRX. That way you can decide if it's something that you need in your Angular application, if it's something you want to learn. So let's talk about what is NGRX. NGRX is not a single package, but a set of packages. And those packages give you tools for state management in Angular. And what does mean state management in Angular? Basically, when you have your Angular application, when you have certain interaction in those applications, the user might click a button, server call might get data from a server, a timer might pop up and ignite some data exchange. So you have certain interaction in your application, and you often need to save data in memory of that interaction. For example, you're grabbing stuff from a server, you probably want to hold them in memory and then display something in your component. So a state is basically organizing your data in memory. So NGRX helps you organize the data that you're getting from a server, from a user, from a timer, from wherever in your application. It helps you organize that data in a convenient state management where you can see all the changes, where your components react to those changes. So NGRX helps you with state management in Angular. It's the most popular state management library for Angular. And this is an important aspect, especially if you're in the job lookout as an Angular developer. A lot of organization adopted this pattern as the way to manage their state. And since NGRX doesn't have a really easy learning curve, it does give a developer an advantage if he already is mastering these tools. So if you want to get your Angular job, it will give you an advantage to actually have experience with the NGRX library. It's a Redux-inspired implementation using RxJS. So Redux, if you come from React, you probably already know about the popular Redux library to manage state in React. Basically, it's a convention where you use actions and reducers to manage your state. Certain convention how state is changing and how you manage that state change. And NGRX is actually doing a Redux implementation using RxJS. So it's not really important to understand what Redux right now because we'll cover about it in the chapter. But if you come from React, know this is the popular Redux implementation in Angular. So if this bullet is not exactly clear because you're new to the concept of Redux, it's okay. We'll talk about it further in the lessons in the chapter. And in this chapter, we're going to cover, we have a few lessons about the different NGRX packages, about NGRX Store and Store DevTools and effects and NGRX data. We'll talk about NGRX packages and how they help you manage your NGRX state. We'll also talk about best practices, how to work properly with those packages. So how are we going to learn about NGRX? We split the lessons to short lessons where each lesson will have a lesson summary that you can read about the lesson. We'll have a video. You will have some lessons of coding exercise where you can go to the site and write code to practice what you learn. And we'll also include interview questions that you might get asked and answers to those interview questions. And basically you start your learning of NGRX from the Academy site. So it's academies.com, EN, course, Angular, NGRX. So it looks like this. And from here, this is your starting point to learning NGRX. Let's show a demo of an Angular application that is working with NGRX. This way we can understand the essence of NGRX and understand what NGRX is all about in order to understand if we actually need NGRX in our application and if it's something that we want to learn. So to see the demo, all you need to do is go to the academies.com site /en course Angular NGRX to the NGRX chapter page, which I have open here. And on the right side of the page, you'll see a demo, a short animation of the demo with an article describing everything. But let's examine the demo ourselves. We have the code to the demo in the lesson code, and you actually have the demo deployed. So you can click the link here to see the demo. Now the demo is a simple application that you write your name, you log in, and then you have a list of books. After you log in, you have your avatar here, and you have a list of books. You can add a book, and those books that you add are added to a list component in the URL books. Really simple application, and one of the nice things that all the data in the state of this application is managed by NGRX. Now, an easy way to actually examine what NGRX is holding is by working with Open the Developer tools, and you can install an extension called Redux DevTools. After you install that extension, you have additional tab here named Redux, and in this tab, you can actually examine what NGRX holds. So right after I worked with the app, I see that I logged in, so I have a user with the name that I entered. The header component is subscribed to NGRX user, so whenever this user is updated, the header will be updated with that information. Also, I can examine the books. The table here is subscribed to the books section in our NGRX state. So this developer tool describes you how your NGRX state looks like. What is the current data that is held in memory that helps you display the UI like it is now. So this is like a peep to what NGRX is holding now. So NGRX is holding a user, where you can see at the top section, and the table is subscribed to the book list, which you can see here all the books that you entered. So a nice thing is that NGRX is very predictable. You see the data in your app, but you also can examine how your application reached the data of the app. So I can also time travel back. Before I had two books, I can go back one step back and see that I had only one book before. And the component is updated accordingly, so I have only one row. And I can go even further back in time where I had 0 books. So you can actually see your state as well as how you reached your state. That's a nice thing about state management. It's easier to understand how you reach the present condition that you are in, and then examine all the steps that you took. So it's easier to debug, it's easier to test, it's easier to restore the user also to where he left. There's a lot of advantages of using a state management library like NGRX. And you see in this small demo if it's something that you actually need. Usually, if you're working on a medium large Angular application, you usually need some kind of state management library, and it will help you in your Angular application development. Using NGRX in your Angular application has advantages and disadvantages. Let's go over the advantages of combining NGRX in your Angular application. So first of all, in person, not regarding your application, but regarding your personal skills in Angular, a lot of organizations with large Angular applications are adopting NGRX as their state management solution. Remember, NGRX is the most popular state management solution in Angular. So a lot of organizations are adopting and using NGRX. And since NGRX doesn't have such an easy learning curve, definitely if you have that knowledge of using NGRX, it definitely adds advantage and adds you extra point when you go to that job interview as an Angular developer. So this is one advantage you have. Another advantage is conventions. So regardless of state management or of NGRX or even on Angular, when you're developing software, it's good practice to have certain repeating conventions. So certain way to handle things. So certain ways that allows you to later see patterns and use some kind of design pattern to best solve a problem in your software development. And we do it using conventions. For example, if you take your database tables and you keep with the same naming conventions, you often see similarity between tables, and then you start thinking maybe I should do inheritance or some other pattern. Anyway, the fact that you kept conventions in your naming made you look at two tables, at the similarity of those two tables, and made you think about not repeating yourself, about certain patterns that you need to use to not repeat yourself. And it's also true how you manage your memory data, how you manage your state. If you have certain patterns and certain convention to managing your data, you'll soon see some kind of repeating patterns that you can solve and tackle in a good repeatable generic way. Then you have libraries like NGRX data that says, okay, we have a repeating actions regarding collections that are grabbed from the server. So since everything is repeating and the same convention is repeating, now we can create a powerful tool to help you synchronize your NGRX state with the data from the server. So conventions are really important, and they're also important in state management, and using a state management library, not necessarily NGRX, this is true for other state management libraries. For example, NGXS is also a popular state management library in Angular. It's true in general to have a certain convention to managing your state in an application. So convention is important in software development, and in general, it's important in state management as well. As you saw from our demo, NGRX has really good debugging tools. You can install the Redux dev tools, and you can actually examine and see in every second of your app how your state looks like. It decouples your component UI. So the NGRX has a library called NGRX Effect, and instead of components saying that they want to take HTTP client, or they want to take a service and grab stuff from the server, or do some action regarding business logic, with NGRX Effect you can actually decouple it, and component just need to mention his intention. Just send an action with the intention I want. I want to read the list of books, and it helps decouple the component from the business logic from services or from HTTP client, which makes your component easier to test, to scale. So it decouples your component UI from business logic. It makes component easier to test. So now all you need to do when you test a component that uses the state is you have to place the way you want the state to look like in a test, and then your component jumps to the way the component will look like when the state looks as you stated in the test. So it makes the test easier it makes components easier to test. What you do is you take your store, you populate it with a state, you mount your component, and then your component is interacting with the test with the state, and it's really easier to mimic this behavior in tests. It's easier to manage collection. So NGRX also has a set of utilities for managing collection, like the books array that we just saw in our demo. You actually have good tools in NGRX to handle with those repeating stuff that you do on collection, like add an entity, remove an entity, update an entity. It's also easier to restore the user to the same state. So if the user leaves your app, you can always save the state in Redux, in NGRX. You can always save that state, and when he returns to your site, all you need to do is reload the store with that state. Either you save the state on his browser, on local storage, or you could send it to a server before he leaves, and then you can actually restore the user to the same point in time with the same state. So it actually sees a continuous thing in your app instead of starting everything from scratch. So it's much easier to restore the user to the same state if you're using NGRX. So this is some of the list of benefits that you get from using NGRX in your Angular application. Let's talk about the pushback of NGRX, the disadvantages of using NGRX in your Angular application. So the first one is hard learning curve. It's not that simple to really understand NGRX, and it helps if you know Redux and the Redux pattern. And I feel that most Angular developers do not fully grasp how to work with NGRX. They're simply kind of technical, copy-pasting boilerplate code and not really understanding the NGRX. Therefore, they're doing a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad practices. They're not using all NGRX capabilities and packages and shortcuts. And the reason is it's not as easy to learn. There's a lot of packages in NGRX and a lot of understanding regarding the Redux pattern that you have to understand before you actually grasp the library. All of those things we were going to cover in this chapter. So hard learning curve will be the number one disadvantage that I think the NGRX library has. Another disadvantage: there are many files that you need to create and many boilerplate code. You have to create a file for the state, a file for the actions, for the reducers, and things are, there's a lot of files and boilerplate code that you have to maintain. Although I do have to mention that the library NGRX was aware of that problem and created a lot of shortcuts to reduce the amount of boilerplate code that you have to create. Fortunately, a lot of Angular developers are not aware of those new things, new shortcuts, and are not using it or not using it properly. But there are action groups, and there are collection reducers, and NGRX data all provide shortcuts to reduce the amount of boilerplate code and reduce the amount of file that you have to maintain with an Angular NGRX application. So that boilerplate and files are reduced, but there is a lot of files and boilerplate code that you have to maintain. They are reduced, but there are still a lot of it. And if you're looking for a library that is a bit easier to learn, but less powerful, less boilerplate code, but with less capabilities, NGRX is the second most popular library for state management. So it's ngxs.io. On NPM trends, it's around 5 times more popular to use the NGRX store. This is the blue line is NGRX store, what we are going to learn in this chapter. And the orange line is what the NGXS that I'm referring to. So this is the second popular library. Check it out as well. But those are the disadvantages of using NGRX. So without further ado, let's start learning how to manage your state in your Angular application using NGRX.